The night air hung thick with gasoline fumes and the distant hum of highway traffic when Officer Sarah Mitchell's radio crackled to life. She had stopped at the old Riverside gas station on Route 9, the kind of place where flickering neon signs cast shadows that danced across cracked pavement like ghosts. It was nearly midnight, and the station attendant had called about suspicious activity behind the building. Sarah had been a cop for 7 years, long enough to know that suspicious activity could mean anything from teenagers drinking cheap beer to something far more dangerous. As she rounded the corner of the building, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, she had no idea that the next 15 minutes would change her life forever and reveal that sometimes heroes arrive on roaring motorcycles, wearing leather and carrying reputations that would make most people cross the street. The three men emerged from the shadows like wolves sensing prey. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her service weapon, but she never got the chance. The first blow came from behind, a pipe that connected with her shoulder and sent her flashlight clattering across the asphalt. Pain exploded through her arm as she fell to one knee, her radio flying from her belt. Through the haze of shock, she heard laughter. Cruel, cold laughter that made her blood run ice. These weren't kids looking for trouble. These were predators who had found an opportunity they couldn't resist. Sarah was a fighter. She had been since childhood, growing up in a rough neighborhood where being the police chief's daughter meant painting a target on your back. She'd taken every self-defense class the academy offered and then some. But there were 3 of them, and she was alone, her shoulder screaming in protest every time she moved. She managed to land a solid kick that sent one attacker stumbling backward, but another grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. The third man, a snake of a human being with tattoos crawling up his neck, approached with a smile that belonged in nightmares. "Well, well," he hissed. "Looks like the cops send little girls to do their work now." Sarah spit in his face. "You're going to regret this." He wiped his face slowly, deliberately, his smile widening. "I don't think so, sweetheart." That's when the sound reached them, a deep, rumbling thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. At first it was distant, almost indistinguishable from the highway noise, but it grew louder, closer, more insistent. The man holding Sarah loosened his grip slightly, his head turning toward the parking lot. Even in her compromised position, Sarah recognized that sound. Motorcycles. Not just 1 or 2, but a whole convoy of them. The roar became deafening as 12 Harley-Davidsons pulled into the gas station, their headlights flooding the area behind the building like spotlights on a stage. Sarah's attackers froze, their bravado evaporating like morning dew under a scorching sun. The motorcycles formed a semicircle, trapping them against the back wall of the station. When their engines cut off simultaneously, the silence was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. The men who dismounted were exactly what you'd picture when someone says hells, angels, leather vests adorned with patches and insignia, beards that could hide small animals, arms covered in ink that told stories of roads traveled and battles fought. Their leader, a mountain of a man named Bear who stood at least 6'5" and probably weighed 280 pounds of pure muscle, stepped forward. His eyes, surprisingly gentle despite his intimidating appearance, locked onto Sarah first, then slowly moved to her attackers. "Let her go," Bear said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The man holding Sarah released her so fast she nearly fell. The 3 attackers huddled together like children caught stealing candy. Sarah slumped against the wall, cradling her injured shoulder, trying to process what was happening. She had arrested Hell's Angels before. She'd testified against them in court. The relationship between motorcycle, clubs, and law enforcement was complicated at best, hostile at worst. Yet here they were, and something in Bear's expression told her she wasn't in danger. At least not from them. "We don't want any trouble," one of the attackers stammered, his earlier confidence utterly demolished. Bear tilted his head as if considering this statement. "Funny thing about trouble," he said, taking another step forward. "It usually finds people who go looking for it. And you boys were definitely looking for it. When you decided to attack a woman, half your size who puts on a badge every day to protect people who mostly don't appreciate what she does. Another rider, a woman with silver hair braided down her back and arms that suggested she could arm wrestle. Most men into submission moved to Sarah's side. "I'm Raven," she said softly. "Used to be a paramedic. Let me look at that shoulder." Sarah wanted to protest, wanted to maintain her authority and dignity. But the pain was overwhelming and Raven's hands were gentle and skilled. As Raven carefully examined her injury, Sarah watched the scene unfold before her. Bear continued speaking to the attackers, his voice never rising above that eerily calm tone. "See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down on that ground and wait for Officer Mitchell's backup to arrive. And while you're waiting, I'm going to tell you a story." He gestured, and several other bikers moved to surround the three men, ensuring they understood that running wasn't an option. They sat, and Bear settled onto his motorcycle, lighting a cigarette with deliberate slowness. 23 years ago, Bear began, I was a different person, angry at the world, looking for fights, thinking the patches on my back made me invincible. One night, not far from here actually, I got into a situation. Bit off more than I could chew with some guys who were even meaner than I was. They had me on the ground, were about to finish the job when a cop pulled up. Female officer couldn't have been more than 5'6". She didn't hesitate. Jumped right in, took a beating herself, but she saved my worthless hide. Sarah found herself listening intently, the pain in her shoulder momentarily forgotten. Raven had fashioned a makeshift sling from a bandana and was now offering her water. That officer could have left me there, Bear continued, his eyes distant with memory. I'd spit at her boots during a traffic stop just a week before. But she didn't. And when backup arrived and they wanted to arrest me for the fight, she told them I was the victim, testified on my behalf, visited me in the hospital. He paused, taking a long drag on his cigarette. That officer's name was Christine Mitchell. Sarah's head snapped up, ignoring the protest from her injured shoulder. That was my mother, she whispered. Bear's eyes found hers across the darkness, and she saw something she never expected. To see in the face of a Hell's Angel, tears. I know, he said. You look just like her. Same stubborn chin, same fire in your eyes. When I saw your nameplate during that community outreach thing last year, I put it together. Your mother changed my life, Officer Mitchell. She showed me that not everyone fits into the boxes society builds for them. She treated me like a human being when I didn't deserve it. The sound of sirens pierced the night, growing closer. Sarah's backup was arriving, but nobody moved. The moment felt suspended, crystallized in time like an insect in amber. My club and we decided a long time ago that we'd honor your mother's memory by doing what she did, stepping up when someone needs help, regardless of who they are or what uniform they wear or what patch is on their back, Bear said. Tonight, we were headed back from a charity ride for kids with cancer, raised nearly $50,000, and we saw these garbage. Humans drag you back here. His expression hardened as he looked at the attackers. Real tough guys attacking a woman alone in the dark. The backup officers arrived. 4 squad cars with lights painting the scene in alternating red and blue. Sarah's partner, Officer Mike Rodriguez, rushed to her side. Sarah, we got the call. He stopped. Taking in the scene, Sarah injured but standing, 3 suspects sitting obediently on the ground, and 12 Hell's Angels watching everything with the calm of people who knew they'd done the right thing. Sarah stood, waving off Mike's concern. I'm okay. These men, she gestured to the bikers, they saved my life tonight. The 3 on the ground are your suspects. Assault on a police officer. Attempted robbery. She looked at Bear. Thanks to these witnesses, you'll have everything you need for a conviction. The next hour was a blur of statements, photographs, and evidence collection. The attackers were loaded into squad cars, their earlier bravado completely extinguished. Sarah refused the ambulance, though she agreed to have her shoulder checked at the hospital after, giving her statement. As the scene cleared and most of the backup officers departed, she found herself alone with Bear and his crew one final time. Your mother, Bear said, his voice rough with emotion. She died 3 years ago, right? I read about it in the paper. Heart attack, Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Her mother had been her hero, the reason she'd become a cop despite knowing how dangerous it could be. She was one of the good ones, Bear continued. The kind that reminds people why we need police. The kind that sees humans instead of statistics. He extended his hand, and Sarah took it. His grip was firm but gentle, mindful of her injury. "You're like her. I can tell. And if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call. Ask anyone in this town how to reach Bear, and they'll get word to me." Raven stepped forward and pressed a card into Sarah's good hand. "That's my number. I run a community center now. Help at-risk kids find alternatives to gangs and crime. Your mom helped me get it started, actually. Though most people don't know that," she smiled. "Turns out ex-paramedic bikers can be pretty good role models when they put their minds to it. Come by sometime. I'd love to tell you more stories about Christine." As the motorcycles roared to life and pulled out of the gas station, Sarah stood in the dissipating exhaust fumes, turning Raven's card over in her hand. Her shoulder throbbed, and she'd need to do a mountain of paperwork. But something warm had settled in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her mother's funeral. Hope, maybe, or faith in humanity, or the understanding that the world was far more complicated and beautiful than the simple narratives of good and bad that she'd been taught. Mike approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered her one, and they stood in companionable silence for a moment. "That was something else," he finally said. "Hell's Angels playing hero." Sarah smiled, thinking about her mother and the legacy she'd left, without ever seeking recognition. "Maybe they're not playing," she said. "Maybe they're just being who they've always been. And we've been too busy looking at the leather and the patches to notice." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood outside Raven's community center, her arm finally out of its sling. Through the window, she could see teenagers playing basketball, working on art projects clustered around computers. Raven saw her and waved, beckoning her inside. As Sarah walked through the door, she saw a photograph on the wall. Her mother, younger than Sarah remembered, standing next to Bear and several other bikers at what looked like a charity event. "She believed in second chances," Raven said, appearing at Sarah's elbow. "She believed that one act of kindness could ripple out and change the world. And she was right." She gestured around the center. "Half the volunteers here are former motorcycle club members. The other half are former gang members, ex-cons, people society wrote off. Your mom taught us that everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst day." Sarah spent the afternoon at the center, listening to stories about her mother she'd never heard, seeing the impact of her kindness reflected in dozens of changed lives. As the sun set and she prepared to leave, Bear pulled up on his Harley. He'd brought his grandson, a shy 8-year-old who was considering joining the junior basketball league at the center. "Officer Mitchell," Bear said, his grandson tucked safely against his side. "Thank you for coming. It would have meant a lot to Christine." He paused, then added, "It means a lot to us." Sarah looked at this man, this supposedly dangerous criminal who organized charity, rides and mentored at-risk youth, and had literally saved her life and understood something profound. Her mother had known what Sarah was only now learning, that people were capable of incredible goodness, regardless of where they came from or what mistakes they'd made. That kindness wasn't the domain of saints and heroes, but of ordinary people, making the choice to help when help was needed. "Thank you," Sarah said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "For everything. For honoring my mother's memory. For showing me that the world still has room for unexpected heroes." As she drove home that evening, Sarah's radio crackled with calls, a domestic disturbance, a robbery in progress, the endless stream of human chaos that was her job. But she felt different now, lighter somehow. She thought about her mother's words from years ago. "The badge doesn't make you a hero." Sarah, choosing to see the humanity in everyone, even when it's hard, that's what makes you one. Behind a gas station on Route 9, 3 violent men had tried to snuff out that humanity. Instead, they'd inadvertently brought together 2 worlds that rarely intersected, law enforcement and outlaw, bikers, and reminded everyone present that kindness. Courage and compassion didn't belong to any one group. They belonged to anyone willing to embrace them. And sometimes, Sarah thought with a smile, angels wore leather and arrived on motorcycles that roared like thunder.